morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's MarkMonitor webinar, Strategies for Building an Effective Test Buy Program, where we'll be reviewing effective test buy strategies. I'm Gina LaFleur of MarkMonitor. Now, before we begin our presentation, I'd like to run everyone through a few housekeeping items. During today's webinar, all participants' lines will be muted to ensure there is no background noise. Following our presentation, we will be holding a Q&A session. If you have a question at any time for our speaker during the presentation, feel free to submit it using the Q&A tab located on your screen. You can also submit your questions at the end of the session. For any questions our speaker won't have time to answer today, we'll make sure to follow up with you after the event. We are recording today's webinar, and we plan to send out a follow-up email to all registrants with a link to the recording and presentation slides within the next couple of days. With that, I'd like to go ahead and introduce our speakers for today's presentation. We are joined by MarkMonitor brand protection expert, Camilla Herron. Cami comes from a DEA intelligence background, moving into the private sector with Microsoft as their regional intelligence analyst for the Asia-Pacific region, working and providing support for the regional investigative team, working transnational investigations in 10 countries for 4 years. Returning to the U.S., she worked as Symantec's brand protection manager for North and South America for just under 2 years prior to moving to Apple as a contract corporate investigator. Late in 2009, she moved to Monster Cable Products, designing, implementing, and running their global brand protection program for over 4 years. She has recently moved to MarkMonitor, part of Thomson Reuters, as their senior brand consultant based in San Francisco. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn things over to Cami to get us started.
Morning, everybody. Let's quickly go through the agenda on the next slide. And I'm going to give you a quick overview of test purchase programs and why I think that they should be part of every brand protection program. We'll talk about the different types of test purchases that are available and the reasons you do different kinds of buys. I'll discuss how you can use the sample products that you buy, the counterfeits that you get, or even legitimate product that's gray market diverted, and how you can use those in valuable ways. We'll talk about how this is valuable and brings ROI to your program. And I'm going to discuss why it's important to bring in expert vendors to do these buys. And then at the end, we're going to talk about how different ways you can justify asking for test buy budget for your programs. So let's talk about what are test buys. They're actually called, different things by different people: test buys, controlled buys, covert purchases, etc. They're all exactly the same thing. Your intent is to buy without the seller knowing who you are. Now, companies that do civil litigation and want criminal investigations are going to do test purchases for evidentiary reasons. They want to have hard physical evidence that they can take to court at the end of their processes. A lot of companies choose not to do those kinds of things, and they also need test buys, but for non-evidentiary reasons, and I'll talk to you about how they can use those and bring value a little bit later. You can look at the graphic there. It kind of discusses the two different sides. Now, if you're planning a criminal investigation, a prosecution, or civil litigation, you have to have hard physical evidence in hand. You can't go to court or go to law enforcement unless you've got physical evidence that you've purchased from the suspects. You need court-ready reports documenting the entire test buy process, how it was performed, and that it was following all rules of evidence, which we'll discuss a little bit later as well. You need to establish chain of custody, which the vendors know how to do through their expertise, which is very, very important. And there's got to be proper handling, processing, labeling, photographing, storing, and shipping of evidence if you ever plan to use it in court. Okay. The real purpose of test buys is to obtain product from parties that are selling suspect counterfeit products, or when you suspect that there's gray market diversion, you're buying genuine products from different people in the hopes that you'll be able to find out how they got a hold of it and got it out into the marketplace. You're going to be buying from growing a number of international marketplaces that are online. There's more and more global websites going up all over that are selling suspect product. And you can do test purchases from physical locations like brick-and-mortar stores, the vendor stalls in the malls, swap meets, or other places like that. And the main thing you get when you do a test buy is you're validating high-value targets. You're getting evidence that they are participating in criminal activity. You're also getting product in hand that you can use as training materials for law enforcement, customs officials, and even customer service folks in your own companies to be better able to handle calls when people call in wanting to know if they've purchased counterfeit product by mistake. Also, internal engineering people like to get samples. The quality assurance, quality control folks like to look and take apart counterfeit, looking for genuine components in counterfeit products, or to see if you've got genuine products in counterfeit boxes, and there's a whole bunch of different combinations. But there's other departments in your company that can benefit from test buy products. Also, you need to generate product identification guides. This is one of the really, really important reasons you do buys, and I'll discuss in more detail why you do that. Why you need to buy undercover. When you're buying from a suspected individual, you need to protect the buyer and investigator's identity. You don't want them to even suspect that you're looking at them for anything beyond just you're an average citizen, you're out there buying products. You can obtain the evidence, and if you go in as an anonymous person, you can do buys over a period of time and they don't get suspicious. And this evidence, like we said before, is what you need to go to law enforcement or for civil actions. The buying of product over a period of time when you're doing criminal investigations speaks to the intent and knowledge of the criminal activity in the ongoing criminal enterprise. So you can demonstrate that they've been doing it for quite a while. I've actually had people, when I've caught them, say, oh, but, you know, I bought this product and you just happened to buy one piece of counterfeit by mistake and I didn't know it was there. So by doing a series of test buys over the course of an investigation, you can confirm that they knew they were selling counterfeit. And this is the same situation with diversion of legitimate goods in the gray market. If you've got serialization on your products, you're able to find out if things are being sold out of channel or out of region, because a lot of the contracts specify regional sales, and sometimes when people are acting poorly, they're selling out of their regions. When should test purchases occur? For criminal investigations, a lot of time you identify a high-value target with your online monitoring, and you buy a piece of suspect product. Once you confirm it's counterfeit, you can initiate your investigation. And as I said, over the lifespan of the investigation, sometimes you want to do several more buys throughout the investigation to get more evidence, but to also show that the criminal activity has been going on for quite a while. Civil litigation, it's the same thing. Find your targets, prove the suspicious activity with the product in hand, and then you move forward and you can file your civil suit. And even through civil litigation, until you actually file it, you can accumulate several test buys showing that, they've got multiple different products that are counterfeited, not just one or two of your products. If, a lot of these sellers are selling a variety of your products that are counterfeited. And during the investigation, like I said, it proves intent, but also during investigation, sometimes the bad guys start selling different products, and you want to confirm that those new products are also counterfeit. So you should be doing that at the same time. So the difference between evidentiary and non-evidentiary test purchases, like I said, if you're going to use them for criminal investigation or civil litigation, they have got to be evidentiary. They have to be handled as evidence, following all rules of law of evidence and with chain of custody in place. But even if you're not doing them for evidentiary reasons, there's a lot of reasons you want to do test buys in your program for other areas in your company. Like I said, quality control for monitoring the manufacturing. Is it, consistently good manufacturing, or are there problems with components being mischanneled? Training purposes for law enforcement, customs, and consumer education, your customer service folks. When you're doing training for law enforcement, I found a lot of times that they actually like you to be able to leave samples of counterfeit product with them so they have physical product in hand when they're trying to determine at the ports of entry whether something is legitimate or not. Your product identification guides, you need to have genuine product side by side with counterfeit product to be able to show the different markings and how you distinguish one from the other. Some companies, which I have done in the past, actually save the counterfeits. We built up a library. And in this one instance, we were looking at specific tool marks on discs. So we knew that certain discs were coming in from the same manufacturer, off the same machine. We were able to get that detailed. And we could kind of monitor their activity with the number of samples we were getting from around the world. If you're doing market surveys and you need to reach out to kind of see what's going on out there, testing, it gives you test buys, give you a real feeling for the scope of the fraud. Is it global? Is it just regional? Is it just certain parts of the United States? Is it just off eBay? Is it just off Amazon? And so sometimes you do test purchases to kind of determine business intelligence like that. You're also looking for traceable components. Like I said, you could have genuine product that has chipsets or boards inside that are counterfeit, which speaks to the issue of how are they getting into the genuine product. Or I've found genuine product in counterfeit packaging, which speaks to why is the factory using counterfeit packaging, or how is the genuine product getting to the counterfeiter's hands to be put into the counterfeiting packaging. So let's go over again why you need test purchases. First, you've got to validate your targets, and this is how you can focus your budget and only do test buys on viable targets. You're not just out there randomly doing buys and hoping that you'll hit on suspicious people. Usually test buy budgets are pretty limited, so you want to be able to spend wisely when you're spending on those. The obtaining of physical products enables you to, one, confirm whether it's counterfeit or is it gray market diverted product. And both of those things are really, really important because a lot of companies don't just have a counterfeiting problem. They've also got a gray market diversion problem that they're trying to solve. And until you get the product in hand and can see if there's ways to trace it, you're not going to be able to address that problem. And that way you can actually kind of take your test purchases into the partner compliance arena and for channel management purposes, for oversight and monitoring. The generation of accurate current product identification guides is really, really important. That's why I'm coming back to it here. U.S. Customs have an intranet that is posted at all the ports of entry into the United States. And when you do really comprehensive product identification guides comparing counterfeit product with genuine product with side-by-side photos, this is posted on the intranet, and it makes it much easier for the inspectors to be able to go pull up your brand and look at what's going on with the product and look for identifiers or distinguishing markings. The other thing when you have this product identification guide that you need to think about is you have to keep it current. If your company is releasing new products or you've end-of-life the product and you've got new generations, you've got to continue to buy and get the new samples of the counterfeit so that you can keep this comparison guide current, because otherwise it makes it difficult for the inspectors. So the value of using professional vendors and service providers to do your test buys. The integrity of your hard physical evidence for criminal or civil actions is key to the whole endeavor. If your evidence isn't solid, you're not going to prevail in either of those. Experienced vendors understand all the requirements and procedures for maintaining rules of evidence and chain of custody procedures. Doing the buys in-house, a lot of companies do that, and that's fine, but I've also seen where when they get to court, the defendants challenge that evidence because it was not purchased by an independent party. It was purchased by someone with an interest in the case within the company. There's no proof that the chain of custody or rules of evidence were followed, and so you can eliminate that challenge by going with professional, experienced investigators. Now, the darknet test purchases are something I really want to focus on. More and more criminals are moving to the dark net as they get more sophisticated in their criminal activity. And getting into the dark net, accessing it, navigating it, interacting with the criminals that are hiding in the dark net takes a lot of experience. You've also got to overcome the suspicion of the people operating down in the dark net. A lot of times they won't sell to people that they've never dealt with before. They won't sell to people that have not been vetted somehow or referred by friends. So experienced investigators have front companies that they use with, undercover identities when they go down into the dark net. And there's a lot of exchange, sometimes a lot of dialogue, email back and forth as the bad actors down there are trying to confirm who the buyer actually is. And by using experienced vendors, you're going to have that experience that you need to be successful down there. This last chart just kind of gives you a summary of what we've talked about and the different reasons that experienced vendors are value add to your program. It's just actually worth the money to hire them to do it. Your evidence is protected all the way around. And so I really, really suggest that you do that. Now, the tough one, a lot of times, is justifying your budget for a test-buy program. And a lot of times when people are designing brand protection programs, this is the component that's overlooked. People don't budget for this. You don't really know when you're going to need test buys or how many, so sometimes it's hard to estimate how much money to set aside. I'd set aside several thousands of dollars a year as a contingency fund in case you need to tap into it. Now, for legal departments, they can decide that they're going to file 4 civil actions this year. They have a better idea of what that's going to cost them. It's a little bit easier for them to plan, budget, spend. And so when they ask for that initially at year planning, it's easier usually for them to get the money. Now, when you're doing criminal investigations, you can also do that. You can decide you're going to look at 6 bad actors throughout the year, and that's fine. But what if during your online monitoring really big targets come up, or you identify big networks that are working together? At that point in time, you're going to need to do more test buys on a broader range of vehicles, online, in person, at brick and mortars or whatever. And it's more difficult to anticipate what kind of budget you're going to get, that you're going to need, So anyway, it's also easier when you're planning budget if you can get budget share from different departments in the company that are affected by the counterfeiting. Sometimes you can get budget from marketing, you can get budgeting from legal to help you can get budgeting from manufacturing or QA departments, and that way the test buy budget doesn't always have to come out of the brand protection program. And when you're running brand protection programs where security and legal partner, they can share in budget, but in a lot of companies, the brand protection program is run in a security department. And that is always a challenge in getting budget because security departments are cost centers and they don't generate revenue for the company. And so that's one of the first places companies go to cut budget, and they make it very tight. So going in and being able to have a clear way of explaining the ROI of the test buy program and why you need it is really, really important. You've also got to anticipate that when you're doing investigations in foreign countries, the cost is going to be higher. And like I said, if you're going over to Asia Pacific, the cost for doing investigations in China, for example, is exponentially higher than it is for doing investigations in Europe. And a lot of times people aren't aware of that when they plan their budget. So I just wanted to touch on that as a point too. So that's basically an overview. And if anybody's got any questions.
Thank you, Cammy, for that overview. We're now ready to open it up for our Q&A session, and we did have some questions come in. So the first one is, what is the best strategy for performing an internet buy to establish jurisdiction for litigation purposes?
Okay, in my personal experiences, I've always tried to get LA venue and down in Los Angeles, and the reason is the judges are very, very up to speed on intellectual property law. They understand the damage that counterfeiting is causing to the economy and the losses of jobs. And so by having a vendor down there, which we do, it only takes one test purchase to establish venue there. So you have the product delivered in LA, and you can litigate from LA, and you can make people defend themselves in court. So say you buy from Missouri, but the product's delivered in LA. The Missouri defendant has to defend themselves in LA, which usually means a lot of cost and expenditure, and a lot of times they'll actually rather settle rather than have you take a case to court. The other place where I believe that they're very proactive is in New York. I've not had experience very much in the courts there, but I do know they have a very, very proactive anti-counterfeiting program in the city of New York, and they have dedicated people, as well as Los Angeles has a dedicated sheriff's unit that's focused on the counterfeiting, which is also an added bonus if you're trying to do criminal work down there and get LA venue.
Great. So another question that came in, what goes into the investigation report that's provided with the buy?
Okay, I want to make something really clear. When you're getting a report for test buys, you're getting a report on the entire test buy procedure. What you bought from whom, where you bought it, what price you paid, documentation of all the financial transactional information, what was received by the vendor performing the buy, documentation of the package that was received, photo documentation of the contents of the package. Everything will be indexed with a unique serial number, and then this is all documented in these reports, and these reports are court ready. So when you need to use them later on, you don't need to worry. They're brought in and everything is substantiated. When you go into court and use evidence, you have got to be able to show every step of the way of how you obtained the evidence, and these reports do that very, very well.
Great. Another, and I just want to remind everyone, if you do have a question, please submit it via the Q&A tab on your screen. So another question that came in is, where can I start in deciding who to target for a test buy?
The way I've typically done that is from my online monitoring. We can find out who the worst actors are, and then we discuss with the clients, you know, what their choices are. Do you want to go do a civil litigation against these people, or do you want to try for criminal activity? And just going out scattershot and looking at the internet, that's a good way to spend a lot of your test buy budget and not really identify high-value targets that are going to bring you return on your investment, either with civil litigation or successful criminal actions.
Okay. Can the vendor store the evidence if my company doesn't have a secure place to do that?
Yes, and this falls back to the rules of evidence. There are specific rules of evidence on how evidence needs to be stored. So if you don't have a facility that follows those guidelines, all our expert vendors are set up to do that, and at the time that you need the evidence for civil litigation or court proceedings, they will transfer that to you with chain of custody, so the integrity of the evidence is always protected.
Another question, can investigators create pretext for test buys, pre-litigation or during litigation, and what are the best practices?
That speaks to why I was saying use experienced vendors. They've done this for a number of years. They have a lot of undercover personas they've developed. They have undercover fictitious businesses that they use as business fronts when they're going out to try and buy from some of these very sophisticated criminals. And they have different mailing addresses and post office boxes and everything, and that maintains your anonymity throughout the whole investigation. Yeah.
Okay. What are some reputable professional test buy vendors in Southern California?
I'm not sure if I'm supposed to actually do this, but the one I've had the most experience with is Investigative Consultants, Chris Buckner in LA. While I was at Monster, he did almost all of my criminal cases and almost all of my domestic test buys. And his people backed me up in court when I needed them.
Another question, are the investigative reports complete enough to give to law enforcement or attorneys?
Yes. And this, again, speaks to the experience of the investigators. They're either former law enforcement themselves or they've dealt with law enforcement throughout their entire careers. So, and they've been in court numerous times. They've had to testify. They've been challenged by defense attorneys. They know exactly what needs to be in there to cover you completely so that there's no challenge to the evidence.
Okay. We're just going to give everyone a minute, see if any more questions come in. Okay. Well, thank you, Cami, for such a great presentation today. We appreciate you sharing your experiences as well as the best practices for our audience today. And I'd like to also thank everyone for tuning in. Your questions always help draw out further information for those listening in. Now, as a reminder, we will be sending out a follow-up email with a link to the webinar's presentation slides and a recording within the next couple of days. So you can be on the lookout for that email. And that concludes our webinar for today. Thanks again for tuning in, and have a great day, everyone.